Hello everyone, what's up warrior students? Long time no guide. Here we finally have my first guide for Wrath Classic. This guide, even though it's mainly aimed at level 70 on prepatch, most of the informations still hold true for level 80 warriors. So if you're looking for a guide that shows you like how the rotation works and how the spells compare to each other, this guide still holds true. The only thing that isn't really accurate is like your talents and your glyphs, because this will most likely change with level 80. However, this is going to be a very long video, so we're gonna have timestamps in the video description below. As well, there are a couple of bugs or strange interactions that are still in the game, and I hope they are going to be fixed. However, we are going to talk about them in the rotation part, and so you know what's up when they're actually fixed. They don't really change a whole lot if they are fixed. If Blizzard, however, is going to release like a Bonobos spaghetti patch where they make things even worse, I'm going to be on top of that, and I'm going to release a video talking about that stuff, informing you about that as soon as possible. Now, the chapters in this video are structured as followed. First of all, we are going to take a look at all the buttons that we have and compare them to each other. This is really neat, especially if you don't know a lot about the spec and Wrath of the Lich King. You really need this knowledge to make like decisions on the fly if you are put into unique situations, or even a lot of the things are very nice to know in general. After this, we are going to take a look at the build that I'm running for prepatch. And yeah, there are a couple options, so we're going to talk about them. And after this, finally, we are going to go into rotation and yeah, some min-maxy stuff that you can do. And then we talk about add-ons. And like I said, we talk about the bugs that are in the game. And yeah, and that's it. Pretty long video. I hope you will enjoy it, and let's roll. So for the next part of the video, we are going to take a look at one of my beautiful artworks. Not this one, this one. Yeah, to give you guys an understanding on how your spells will compare to each other on average in terms of damage per cast and damage per rage or damage per resource. By the way, by making a list like this, and for like if you pick up another class or playing another game, by making a list of like this, and give it a little thought, read all the passives, all the procs, all the talents that your class has. Yeah, you don't need to watch any more of those badly structured guides like mine. You will just see that there's only one way that it makes sense to press your buttons, basically. So now, so here it says on average, and this means that those spells are compared based on an average outcome, because some of those spells can crit, some of those spells cannot crit, and some of those spells have an increased crit chance, like Overpower. For the most part, you want to look at your average outcomes, especially in PvE, but sometimes the damage potential is as well really important, because you can unlock the highest potential of that spell, and therefore you know that you, in this case, want to maybe prioritize this skill. Another big advantage, if you take a look at a list like this and you understand how your spells compare, is that you can make the right decision in like unique situations that require like improvising or anything. Especially in PvP, the damage potential is oftentimes more valuable than your average outcome. But yeah, let's take a look at the damage per cast average outcome. We have Rend on top, then we have Overpower, and at the third place we have Execute, then Mortal Strike, then Slam. Now on the damage per rage, we have Overpower on top, then Rend, so it's the same like on damage per cast, but with a different order. And then we have Execute again at the third place, and then we have Mortal Strike, actually on the same level like Slam or Rift Slam, and then all the way to the bottom we have Heroic Strike. Now it's very easy to see which spells are the most important, especially if we look at potential as well. It's like Rend, Overpower, Execute, and maybe Mortal Strike, but Mortal Strike would be below Execute. So first priority is to get as much effective rend uptime as possible and to not lose any opportunities to cast overpower. Your next highest priority would be to get as many executes out as possible, and to do so you actually need to cast execute as soon as it's available. Like if you get an execute proc, you press it right away. This is different a lot of the time, especially if you have a proc that has an ICD, because then you know that it cannot proc again for the next couple of seconds. So you can wait and use the ability that procced in a situation that is like suitable. You don't have this luxury of execute because executes can proc of itself, because it has no ICD. It can proc back to back to back to back. So if you don't cast execute right away, you're creating a risk that you will lose out on entire execute casts. Now you could calculate if it's worth to delay Mortal Strike or to immediately cast execute. But the calculation for this is not as simple. Like for example, if you would cast Mortal Strike before execute, you might think that you have a 9% chance because of the Mortal Strike that you will get another proc of execute. So in 9% of the cases you would lose 100% value, which means on average you lose 9% value of that execute cast if you cast Mortal Strike before that. If you do it the other way around, if you cast execute before Mortal Strike, if Mortal Strike is ready, you lose 1.5 seconds, which is your global, from your cooldown of Mortal Strike, which is basically Mortal Strike's DPS potential. And 1.5 out of 6 is 25%. So you would lose 25% from your Mortal Strike or 9% from your execute on average. The thing is, like I said, it's not that easy, because while your Mortal Strike GCD is running and you wait to cast your execute, there maybe you will do a white hit in that time, which will increase the chance of missing out on an entire execute as well. And that's not all, because our rotation doesn't only consist out of Mortal Strike, execute and white hits. Obviously we still have other priorities that are even higher than that, and this is obviously effective rend uptime, overpower usage, and maybe even thunder armor, thunderclap, or things like this. So if you prioritize Mortal Strike, 1.5 seconds will go along, and you have a high chance that before you can cast your execute, you need to refresh rend, you need to cast overpower, or you need to refresh thunder armor. And if we now look at the damage potential as well, then we can see that execute has the highest damage potential out of like our 4 spells here, because if execute crits, it actually hits like a truck, so you really don't want to miss out on those extra executes, because only with a lot of execute procs and with the ability to cast a lot of them, you are able to deal serious damage, and this is something that you obviously want to do. Now, by looking at the damage potential, we can see that Bladestorm is actually on top, and this means like Bladestorm is only the best in potential if you manage to squeeze out all the 7 hits that Bladestorm can deal. Like it will deal 1 hit in the exact moment when you cast it, and then after 1 second it will deal the next, and then after 2, 3, 4 and so on. The most effective timing to cancel your Bladestorm is after 3 seconds, so after 4 hits. However, sometimes you are able to squeeze out all the 7 hits, and this is why this is on potential on top. You can create windows to cast your Bladestorm that will almost guarantee you all the 7 hits. However, if you get an execute proc while spinning, you need to cancel your Bladestorm right away, sadly, and this is something that you cannot control because those procs are just completely random. And then in the second place we have execute, because if you spend 30 rage with execute and it actually crits, it hits like a truck. And one reason why it's extremely important to know about your maximum damage potentials, even in PvE, is you have actually the opportunity or the ability to guarantee the maximum outcome for your execute, and this is Recklessness, because with Recklessness your next 3 abilities are going to crit with 100% chance. So as soon as you pop Recklessness, you pretty much don't want to cast anything else but execute. This is why you want to save recklessness for your execute phase. If you can use it 2 times, obviously you can use it at the start as well. But yeah, if you can only use recklessness 1 time, which is very likely because recklessness has a 5-minute cooldown, you want to pop it in your execute phase, and you do not want to cast any overpowers or mortal strikes, while your next 3 hits will have a 100% crit chance. Now after this, there's Mortal Strike, because the Mortal Strike crit deals a good amount of damage, and a Mortal Strike crit will also apply deep wounds. So this is why this is overrun. And then we have, interestingly enough, we have Overpower at the bottom. So the 2 spells that are on the top in damage per cast and damage per rage on average are actually our 2 worst options when we talk about potential, which is yeah, a very interesting design, I think. And then we have the potential, like the damage per rage potential. There isn't really much change here. We still have Overpower on top, and then we have all the 7 Bladestorm hits basically, and then we have Rend, because yeah, Rend deals like almost as much damage as an execute crit, but it costs only 10 rage, and execute costs like 30 rage most of the time. So yeah, and then we have execute. Now the reason why I don't have Mortal Strike and Slam on the list for potential is because it's really strange to calculate the maximum potential in terms of damage per rage efficiency of Slam, because how you would want to do that? Do you want to imagine like a 10-second swing timer to give like Slam the maximum amount of value, or how you want to do that? Like, it's really strange. Therefore they are not on this list. Most of the time Mortal Strike has a higher damage potential and damage per rage, because Mortal Strike, if it crits, it deals a lot more damage than if your Slam would crit. However, if your swing speed is super low, then yeah, then Slam becomes a lot better than Mortal Strike maybe in potential. So yeah, if your attack speed is slowed ever, then maybe you want to consider using Slam over Mortal Strike. Before we go into the part where I explain to you the build that I'm going to use, I want to introduce you guys to the sponsor of this video, because this is what I'm going to use to show you the build, and this is the World of Warcraft browser game. It's quite nice actually. You can look up builds from other players that are not really up to date anymore. You can pretend that you have infinite money, or that you are the only person in a loot council, or if you don't actually want to play the game, you can simulate boss fights until you're finally on top of the meters.
By winning, I win here and I win there. Now what?
And my favorite feature I use to compare apples and pears. Alright, enough of this. Let's continue with a straight face here. We're going to take a look at the build that I'm going to play. So first up, it's going to be pretty straightforward up until the point where you have to choose your weapon specialization. Because when it comes to choosing your weapon specialization, you want to be aware of the best options that you have available to you. Luckily, with release of the prepatch for only 90k armor, 19k armor, we are able to purchase the Mighty Spatula, the Fake Apollyon, or the Nut Grinder. So the mace, however, is sadly not that good, because mace specialization compared to axe or sword specialization is pretty bad. Technically speaking, the axe specialization, so the Mighty Spatula, would be your best option. However, sword specialization is not that far behind, and it provides a new playstyle. It provides more burst potential and some additional moves, or one additional move actually, that you can use. The 3 best weapons that are available right now is the Mighty Spatula, the Shivering Failspine, or Apollyon the Soul Babe. Now if you are an orc, the Spatula is better than the Failspine. However, if you are not an orc, then the Failspine is better than the Spatula. So I'm going to use Apollyon the Soul Babe, because like I said, sword specialization provides you with a unique move that is not available to the other specs, and this is a heroic strike trick, and it gives you more burst potential and a little bit more fun in my opinion. And like I said, the DPS outcome is pretty much the same, so I'm going to use the sword. In addition, we're going to have to drop sword specialization eventually, because yeah, Poleaxe specialization is just a little bit better, so I'm going to rock my sword for as long as possible. So when we made a choice on what weapon we want to use, we're going to pick up the specialization for that weapon, obviously, and then we have a next choice or a next point where we have to make a decision. So first of all, you always want to pick up Strength of Arms. That gives you 4 expertise. So for example, for me, I don't need to pick any points into Weapon Mastery if I would use an axe, because I'm perfectly soft capped with 0 points in Weapon Mastery. Next thing that you want to look out for is if you need to pick up Trauma, because if you have a cat, you want to pick up Trauma, because the cat, if this cat don't have to apply Trauma, he can put points into more crit, and those points are more valuable than the points that you would get if you don't pick Trauma, and he doesn't need to use one particular move that would cost him DPS. And if you have a bear tank, however, you really don't need to pick up Trauma because they are using their Mangle anyways, and therefore, yeah, I think I don't have a, I think I have a feral tank, so I don't need to pick up Trauma. Anyways, if I do have to pick up Trauma, I would not spec into Improved Mortal Strike. So every point that you can squeeze out of Weapon Mastery or Trauma, you can put into Improved Mortal Strike. If you don't need to pick up Trauma and you don't need to pick up Weapon Mastery, you can put 1 more point into, yeah, Anger Management maybe. However, for me it would look like this most likely, and again, if it doesn't, I would spec like this, for example. Or if I need to put 2 into here, I would go like this. So very easy. Then I already skilled it. Cruelty is extremely good. You want to pick that one up, and Armored to the Teeth as well. Very good. A lot better than Improved Mortal Strike, that's for sure. So as for glyphs, one glyph that you need to use that gives you the most DPS is Glyph of Rending. The reason for this is because it saves you some globals, and globals are very important. It saves you some rage. Rage is not that important, but it's a nice bonus. And in addition, which is not that obvious, every time you reapply rend, you have a chance to create a delay or make a mistake, so it's less chances to do mistakes, and most of the time you get more overpowers per minute if you use this glyph. The next glyph is a choice. Like if you pick up 3 out of 3 Improved Mortal Strike, you have a choice. If you don't have the luxury for 3 out of 3 or mod into Improved Mortal Strike, you always pick Glyph of Execution. If you do, however, can put 3 out of 3 into Improved Mortal Strike, you can use Glyph of Mortal Strike, because with this glyph your Mortal Strike deals more damage than your Execute, and deals more damage per rage spent if you spend 30 rage on Execute. However, if you do get lucky, however, this is only based on an average outcome, because you can still get lucky with your Execute procs, and if you get lucky, Glyph of Execution is still better than Glyph of Mortal Strike. In addition, if you get a long Execute phase, then Glyph of Execution is again better than Glyph of Mortal Strike. So I'm going to go for this setup most likely. As for minor glyphs, you want to pick up the glyph that buffs your shout, the shout that you're assigned to do. However, I don't know which of those glyphs are available at launch and which aren't. I think I would need to use Commanding Shout, and I hope this glyph is available. So, but those glyphs are really minor, so it's not that bad. The next glyph I would pick up is Glyph of Charge, because in some cases this gives me some DPS, because this can give me uptime if I need to travel less per foot, and I can charge earlier because of the additional rage, and this is really nice. And the next one is a very cheeky one. It's Glyph of Mocking Blow. So Mocking Blow is a weapon attack for 10 rage, and 10 rage for weapon attack is a nice filler. If you buff it by 25%, it has the potential to deal more damage than, for example, your Overpower, which is pretty insane, or more damage than your Slam. So that's really nice. There are bosses that you cannot taunt, and there are situations where you do want to taunt, so Glyph of Mortal Strike is a nice cheeky way to squeeze out some extra DPS in some scenarios. Alright, let's talk about rotation and add-ons. So first of all, we have to dive a little bit deeper into the core of the rotation. I need to explain this one to you. And this is overpower and rend. Because those two moves, remember, are like basically our best moves. And therefore, they're building the core of our rotation. Because to be able to cast overpower, if you are expertise capped, what you want to be, you need to have rend up on the target because of Taste for Blood. Taste for Blood will try to proc an overpower every time rend deals damage. This effect has an ICD of 6 seconds, and if you get a proc, you have a 9-second window to cast one overpower. So because it has an ICD of 6 seconds, ideally you want to cast an overpower at least every 6 seconds. Now you can see two Weakauras right here. This one shows Taste for Blood and this one shows rend. The tick markers in the rend Weakauras are tick markers for when the rend is actually going to deal damage, because this is important, because only in those ticks, or when your timer hits one of those ticks, you are actually able to get a Taste of Blood proc, obviously. The Taste for Blood Weakaura shows two tick markers. The orange one is the 6-second marker, so when the timer hits this part here, you need to have casted your overpower, because this is the moment when the ICD runs out, and this is when you should get your next proc. This one here, the white tick, is the tick on 4.5 seconds, so it's 1.5 seconds before the ICD ends. And this is because your globals are 1.5 seconds, so if I would use a skill behind this tick marker, I would not be able to cast my overpower in time anymore, so this is important to know. Then sadly there's a strange bug or strange interaction. I hope they will fix this, and this is that, like you saw right there, your ticks from overpower and the ICD from Taste for Blood will desync from time to time. They actually do that quite often. There they did that again, and it results into less overpowers per minute, which is a significant DPS loss, and it should really be fixed. So again, please do me a favor, go on the PTR and report this bug. It really needs to be fixed. Alright, so we are just going to assume for now that it's working exactly like it's intended. In this case, you would get an overpower proc every 2 ticks. So you get one here, you get one there, you get one there, and you get one at the end. So if you do get an overpower proc on this tick, you're very likely to get one here. If it works as intended, you will always get one with the last tick of your rend. And this means that you don't need to reapply rend right away. You can do that if you don't have anything else to do, you should do that. But if you don't, you can press 2 globals before that. For example, if my rend is over here at the very end, and my execute procs, or I can use a mortal strike, I want to get that mortal strike on cooldown, and I want to get that execute out before I reapply rend. Because I can, because this would mean that I only miss 1 tick of rend. That will not give me an overpower proc, but I gain a mortal strike and an execute. Maybe I even get an entire use of execute, because maybe I get a back-to-back proc and so on. However, because it's not working like it's intended, it makes the rotation very awkward, because you can never really safely, or you can very rarely safely say that you get an overpower proc right here. And basically, if you get 1 proc over here and you don't get a proc here, then you know for sure that you will get one here. But this is like really min-maxy, and it's working extremely awkward because it's bugged, and therefore we don't really have to pay a lot of attention right now to this. As well, sometimes if you miss your chance to cast your overpower, you will not get punished, which is very weird. But anyways, we are going to assume that this is just working like it's intended for this explanation, because they will hopefully fix that, and we don't want to learn stuff that is wrong. And it doesn't really change anything if we if it gets fixed. If it doesn't get fixed, it doesn't really change a whole lot other than DPS and fun. So the next bug that is in the game, or the next thing that shouldn't be in the game, is that your slam cancels your heroic strikes, like so. If you see I Q heroic strike and I cast slam, this slam cancels the heroic strike. This is from TBC and Classic, because in TBC and Classic, slam cancels your auto attack. In Wars of the Lich King, this should work different. It should not cancel your heroic strike or your cleave. And this makes the rotation again a little bit awkward, because sometimes you want to have a heroic strike queued while your slam is running, and in this case, like I queue an heroic strike, I'd press slam and I would need to queue the heroic strike again while the slam is casting, which is to get something happen like this, which is again very awkward and annoying. But yeah, enough about the bugs and strange interactions that are in the game. So we know about our core, we don't want to miss any overpowers, and we have a 6-second time window before we need to use our overpower. Now, reasons why you want to delay your overpower a little bit are obviously mortal strikes and executes, and maybe a charge reef. We will talk about this later. If you don't need to delay your overpower for execute or mortal strike, you do not want to do it. Why? Because if you do not delay your overpower, you have a little bit more wiggle room to cast executes that could proc, or anything else basically, or maybe Thunder Armors that you need to refresh. So casting overpower wide away gives you a lot of wiggle room and should be the thing that you are aiming for. However, there are things that are more important than cast overpower right away. So yeah, this is one more way how you want to min-max that stuff. And other than that, you want to fill with slam if you can, with mocking blow and heroic strike if you feel like that you are going to overcap rage. If you're using a sword, it gets a little bit tricky with heroic strike, because you have always the chance, or you most of the time have the chance to get a sword spec like you just saw, and this sword spec proc will generate rage, but you can transform it into an heroic strike and yeah, block the rage generation so that you don't overcap and get a little bit of bonus. We will talk about the we will talk about the heroic strike trick later, because if you're using an axe, this doesn't really bother you. Alright, let's talk about how you want to use your cooldowns. So you have a couple of cooldowns that can grant you DPS, and this is for one charge, Blade Storm, and then obviously your unused stuff like Recklessness or your Orc Racial, or maybe some potential trinkets. Your unused stuff like trinkets and racials you obviously want to use together with Bloodlust. Recklessness, however, you don't need to use with Bloodlust. If you can only use it once in a fight, you should always aim for the execute phase with your Recklessness. And then obviously together with your unused stuff as well. Potions and all that good stuff. You should as well try to use your unused thingies together with Blade Storm. Yeah, creating a window for Blade Storm or seeing a window for Blade Storm can be a difficult task, but nothing that you cannot master. So there are a couple of reasons why you would want to stop spinning, and this is for one, if you miss an execute cast, if you miss an overpower cast, or if you miss a rend, or if you miss crucial rend uptime, or if you would overcap on rage if you continue spinning. In execute phase, this is a little bit different. In execute phase, you do not want to cancel your Blade Storm for an execute, because you can just execute all the time. So as long as you don't overcap rage, you don't want to cancel your Blade Storm for any executes. So, like I said, you can create this window, or you can spot this window. And for example, if you bank up a little bit of rage, then you pop your coolies, and then you spend all that rage very aggressively and very fast, and then you go into Blade Storm to fill that rage bar back up again while your cooldowns are still running. And then after the Blade Storm, you try to spend your rage bar again really rapidly while your cooldowns are still running. You get a lot of DPS out of this actually. So let's try to make an example here. Now we have banked up a lot of rage, and now we try to get that all out there. And now we can spin for a fairly long time. Now we need to cancel for the execute. Like this. This would be a very good usage for your Bladestorm. With the Charge Reef, it's the thing is that your auto attacks will attack every 3 seconds most of the time, and this is enough time to run out and charge back in. You get 20 rage for this, and your next Mortal Strike or Slam will have an increased crit chance of 25%. Obviously, ideally you do not want to use this buff to cast Slam, but yeah, this is kind of obvious. Now, the problem with Charge Reaving is that every boss has a different hitbox, and on some bosses you can't just run around like crazy and charge back in. So you basically have to practice this move for every boss, and there are even some bosses where this move isn't available. So yeah. Very interesting damage cooldowns, because you can get damage out of them, or you can basically cripple your own DPS by using them wrong. Now the value for Bladestorm that you want to aim for at least is 3 hits. The most ideal time to cancel your Bladestorm, if you need to cancel it, is at 3 seconds of time, because this is 4 hits here. And yeah, with this Weakauras you can see when the Bladestorm is actually dealing damage. Bladestorm is dealing its first hit when you start spinning, and after this every second. 2 hits from Bladestorm is like plus minus 0, you get no real value from this. When you get 3 hits or more, you're starting to get a net positive, and like I said, if you can get through all the 7 hits, that's really good. And the last thing we can talk about, I guess, is Berserker Rage and Blood Rage. So Blood Rage, you don't want to just pop, you want to use it when it actually provides you anything. So a lot of the time when you use it on 50 rage or so, your next auto attack will overcap you on rage because of this. You want to avoid this outcome obviously, and you want to try and use it in situations where you actually need the rage. They will occur from time to time. Sometimes you be a little bit too aggressive with your heroic strike and you maneuver yourself into a rage stuff situation, and you use Blood Rage obviously. Sometimes you get extremely lucky with execute procs, and this will cost a lot of rage to get them all out, and then you want to have Blood Rage as well. Like here, if I would have Blood Rage here, I could cast this execute right away. So the next thing, Berserker Rage, yeah, grants you more rage from damage taken, so it's generally a nice skill. However, it has a GCD, so yeah, try to be smart with this. Don't cripple your Mortal Strike, your execute, or your core at the core of your rotation for Berserker Rage. A good time to use Berserker Rage is while Charge Reaving, because while Charge Reaving you have a little bit of time that you don't, where you cannot really use a global like so. When we later get Heroic Throw, this is again, Charge Reaving is a good time, or while you Charge Reave, it's a good time to cast your Heroic Throw. Like run out, while you run out, throw your Heroic Throw and charge right back in. And lastly, we need to talk about Heroic Strike Trick. So Heroic Strike Trick means that you transform your Sword Spec into an Heroic Strike, because when you have your Heroic Strike queued and you get a Sword Spec proc, the Sword Spec will be an Heroic Strike. This has a couple of benefits. First of all, this Sword Spec can then not glance, which makes it able to crit, and it will obviously deal more damage, and it will not generate any rage. And in the case where you use an Heroic Strike, you don't want to generate rage with your Sword Spec proc. So how you do it, actually you just press Heroic Strike, so you queue it up before you press a spell. So for example, if I would have 90 rage and I want to press Overpower, if this Overpower would give me a Sword Spec proc, this would mean that the Sword Spec will overcap me on rage very badly, potentially. Therefore, I queue Heroic Strike before I use Overpower. like so. So, and lastly, as for Weakauras, I sadly do not have that many genius auras for you. I can give you my rage bar, which I find to be pretty neat. You can have my swing timer that is not really functioning the way that I would like it to. Like, I will take a look at that. Maybe I will get the one from Quartz or so. And obviously you can have my Rend Weakaura and my Taste for Blood Weakaura. Those two Weakauras I think are pretty good. I want to work on the Taste for Blood Weakaura a little bit more, but yeah, as it stands right now, it basically does the thing that you want it to do, but it could be a little bit better. And then obviously the Bladestorm Weakaura is something that you want to have. I will make this one a little bit more beautiful, and then you can have that one. And other than that, you need to look for yourself what you want to have, and there are a lot of Weakauras that you can copy from the internet. Like, it's always a good idea to have Weakauras for like your procs, like executioners, or for trinkets, which I don't have right now, or cooldowns, things like this. If you have like anything special for me to request, you can hit me up on Discord. The link is in the description as well, and I can help you with maybe some questions that you have, or I can as well help you with some Weakauras. If you have a wish for a Weakaura, maybe we can create this one together. So this was a pretty long video. I hope this one showed you everything that you need to know to perform on a good level in prepatch, and we will see each other in the next one. Until then, stay tuned, take care.